Good morning. This is the YouTube channel of The Study, an institute for IAS. Today we are going to start a new series called the Multidimensional Concepts series. In this series, we are going to focus on those issues that are rather cluttered and multidimensional. So we will access it from different directions and try to understand it in totality. So today our topic is India-China boundary issue. Remember, the topic is boundary issue, not the larger India-China relations. Okay, any other aspect of India-China relations will be only, the mention of any other aspect will only be incidental. Our main focus is going to be on the boundary question. Okay, and our approach will be that first we will look at the context that what is happening right now. Then I will mention a few sources that I have referred for this lecture. Now you may or you may not want to read them, that is entirely up to you. After that, we will look into the roots and timeline of India-China border dispute. This is the lengthiest segment. After that, we will break, and from the next lecture, we will start looking into geopolitical angle. That, for example, each and every time a breakthrough happened or some major event happened in the border dispute, what was the geopolitical angle behind it? And then we will see how recently the divergence has been increasing between India and China. Because of that divergence, we had many conflicts in the last few years. And then what is the current status? That means the ongoing standoff which was happening and which is still happening. And then at last we will look at the way forward. So what is the context? The context meaning that why we have considered this boundary issue is cluttered, why we think it is a complicated picture. Okay, why right now we have such a protracted standoff, why soldiers have lost their lives, why they have been martyred. So these things constitute our context. That ongoing standoff on the India-China border is unprecedented in many ways. मतलब कि ऐसा पहले we had disputes on the border before, we had skirmishes, but since 1975, the last loss of life was in 1975. Galwan happened in 2020. So something major has happened, and the loss of life is not, negligible. 20 Indian soldiers have died, and reportedly same or more Chinese soldiers have died. Same number. Then the standoff is now almost 18 months old, very long. Though there have been standoffs in the past that were longer than this. We will talk about an incident called at Samdurung-Chu later, which lasted for 7 years. But compared to the intensity of this event, it was rather less important. And it is continuing. It is unlikely that though we have had breakthroughs in Galwan Valley, we had breakthrough at Pangong So. 2 days ago, we had breakthrough at Gogra. But some areas like Depsang Plains, Hot Springs, Demchok, those areas are still conflicted, they are still disputed, and it is becoming very difficult to arrive at consensus. So it is ongoing. And the status quo that kept tranquility on the border since 1990s has changed. Look, a disputed border can't be peaceful, but there can be tranquility, meaning there would be no no fighting, no eyeball to eyeball, situation. So we had tranquility since 1990s, but even that is disturbed. So status quo has changed, and a new status quo refuses to emerge due to the geopolitics of Indo-Pacific, not the geopolitics of India-China relationship, mind you, the geopolitics of Indo-Pacific. Now Quad could be a part of it. Okay, the COVID pandemic could be a part of it, part of that geopolitics. The larger Indo-China-Pakistan relationship could be a part of it. So point is that we are unable to arrive at the new status quo because of the geopolitics, the big picture, what do you say? And what are our goals? First, to understand the nature, history and timeline of the border dispute with China, okay? And to understand the link between the modern history international relations, internal security, and economic growth. Therefore, we have called it a multidimensional issue. The boundary dispute is not linear. It not only pertains to the boundary issue, it pertains to the larger big picture, right? And it has all these angles. Some of the important books that we have referred for this lecture. First is The Choices Inside the Making of India's Foreign Policy by Shiv Shankar Menon. How India Sees the World by Shyam Saran. Both these were very high-level diplomats. Both were foreign secretary at one point. Shiv Shankar Menon was NSA at one point. Then India After Gandhi by Ramchandra Guha. The segments which are related to the border dispute. And another book by Shiv Shankar Menon, India and Asian Geopolitics. This is very recent. It was released in 2021 only. And apart from that, some other sources like Burton Littner's book, China's India War, though it is less significant compared to these four, and then what we read in newspapers on regular basis. So these are some of the important sources. Okay. Now, first thing first, difference between LAC and LOC. Let's understand the difference between the border with Pakistan and border with China. The LOC, line of control, is the border with Pakistan, and LAC, line of actual control, is the border with China. Okay. LAC emerged from the 1948 ceasefire line based on the UNSC resolution. If you recall that immediately after independence, there was the first India-Pakistan war on the issue of Kashmir, right? The irregulars, the Pakistani irregulars, tribes person and auxiliary army person attacked Kashmir Valley, and India, when the Maharaja of Kashmir signed the instrument of accession, India sent troops and pushed back many of them, even though they were not fully pushed out of Kashmir. So, and before that we had this ceasefire brokered by Security Council. So at that time, when the ceasefire was announced, the Pakistani forces and Indian forces, the line that separated them was LOC, line of control. Now it was designated as LOC. First it was ceasefire line, brokered by Security Council. Then it became line of control in Shimla Agreement. This Shimla Agreement was signed in 1972 in the aftermath of India-Pakistan War of 1971, in which East Pakistan was liberated and it became Bangladesh. After that, we had captured almost 91,000 Pakistani soldiers, and normally after a major war, you sign a peace agreement. So Shimla Agreement was the peace agreement, and in that agreement, LOC, the ceasefire line was turned into line of control. Okay, remember, this is not the international boundary. India claims Pak-occupied Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. Similarly, Pakistan also has some ulterior claims on India. Therefore, it is not international boundary, but this is the line of control. This is the ground reality. It is delineated on a map signed by both DGMOs. DGMO means Director General of Military Operations. Both the armies have this very high-ranking, very significant officer in both the armies. It has an international legal sanctity. This word is very important. It has an international legal sanctity. Why? Because both the countries have properly signed a document demarcating the LOC. And if you cross it, then you are an aggressor. You will be blamed for starting a war if you cross the LOC. Why? Because it has a legal sanctity. Example is Kargil War. The thinking of Pakistani army in Kargil war was that once we occupied the heights of Kargil, India would have no choice but to cross the LOC, to cut us off from the backside. Okay, then we will internationalize the Kashmir issue. We will say, look, India is the aggressor. They have crossed the LOC, but India understood it, and Indian army decided that under no circumstances we will cross the LOC, because they knew the moment we cross LOC, we will be called an aggressor. We will be called, we would be blamed for starting the war. Therefore, LOC is a legal entity. But both India and China have different and conflicting perceptions of LAC. That means we do not agree on the exact alignment of LAC, line of actual control. It has three sectors: Eastern, Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim; Central, Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand; that border, and western, which is mainly Ladakh and Aksai Chin. The process of clarifying the LAC has effectively stalled since 2002. Why? We will see later in the lecture. For China, LAC is based on the 1959 claim line. And for India, LAC should be what it was immediately before the 1962 war. We will later see the difference between these two, that what is 1959 claim line. It was a letter written by Prime Minister of China Zhou Enlai to Prime Minister Nehru, in which he claimed that this line should be the LAC. Whereas India said, no, this is, you have illegally ingressed into the Indian territory, and what you are calling LAC is just your pure दादागिरी. Okay, आप जो मांग रहे हैं उसका कोई legal basis नहीं है. You don't have any moral right. You just you are just walked into, and now you are saying, okay, let's draw an LAC. India said कि the actual position just before the war should be the LAC. Now another point, we will understand the difference more clearly later in the lecture. Understand this difference. Line of actual control is not the actual claim line. Means it is not the international boundary. Okay. Though it is possible that in future both India and China may agree on the exact alignment of LAC, and even that will be a breakthrough, because that will usher in lasting peace in subcontinent. But even then, even when we both have agreed on the alignment of LAC, that would not mean that this is international boundary and the claims and counterclaims on the territory of each other is over. Example, Arunachal Pradesh is on our side of LAC. China accepts. However, China says Arunachal Pradesh belongs to me. Okay, not only Tawang area but the entire Arunachal Pradesh. Similarly, we accept the ground reality that much of the Aksai Chin is on that side of LAC. We accept that, but we claim we claim Aksai Chin that it is part of India's territory, because historically we have proofs, we have agreements, we have maps that show Aksai Chin has been traditionally part of India. So line of actual control would mean that this is the line on which would separate the armies of both the countries, which would separate the area that they control. But that doesn't mean that this finalizes their claims. Okay, LAC would not be international boundary. That would come even later, when all territorial claims are settled. Now, when would that happen? It is anybody's guess. Currently, India trying to maintain status quo on patrolling points, and China trying to come as closer as possible to the 1959 claim line. That is, alter the status quo. Now, what is the difference between these two approaches? We will see later in the lecture as we go forward. The LAC in eastern sector is along the 1914 McMahon line, meaning the Arunachal border. On the Arunachal border, LAC is the 1914 McMahon line. Now, you might ask, what is McMahon line? Under what circumstances it was drawn? Who were the parties to the McMahon line? What are the Chinese objections? Though these things are relevant, but they fall slightly outside the scope of this lecture. So it will be my recommendation and request that you separately read on it. We will cover it slightly later in the lecture, but we would not go into the history of McMahon line specifically. Okay. It goes as per the principle of high Himalayan watershed. Now, watershed is a geographical concept. Okay. The idea of watershed is used in planning also, that if a particular geographical area, it drains at a particular point. Okay. So that whole area is called a watershed, or it could be called a micro watershed. And that area is, considered as one unit for the purpose of planning. That is one angle. Another is, strictly in geographical sense, a watershed which demarcates the drainage basin of different rivers. Okay. For example, you have these mountains. Okay. Pardon my poor drawing. Now, on that side, a different set of river flows. Okay. And on this side, a different set of river flows. In India's map, you can think of Aravali as a watershed. Okay, because So water rivers on the eastern side and rivers on the western side, they flow in different directions. Okay, Himalayas are a good watershed because then you have a drainage basin of Ganga in Indus Ganga river system, and then you have drainage basin of Brahmaputra on that side. Okay, so normally such watersheds are are helpful to draw international boundaries, because then it becomes very easy, it becomes a natural frontier. You must remember that when you study modern history, we study that British were looking for the natural frontiers of their empire in India. What it does, that when a watershed is used as a boundary, then the boundary is very easily identifiable, it is very easily defendable. Okay, and less disputes emerge. There is another idea, it's called Thalweg principle. It's called Thalweg principle. This is also used to demarcate boundaries between different countries and different regions. Though I will not go into it, you should Google it separately and study it. Okay. So McMahon line follows the high Himalayan watershed, meaning the drainage basin on both sides of that high Himalayan watershed are totally separate. Therefore, it is a very identifiable feature. Okay. And that identifiable feature, that mountain range, that the chain of hilltops, that is used as boundary. So the claim was, when this line was drawn, that it follows the high Himalayan watershed. Though there are minor disputes about the ground position for certain areas such as Longju and Asfila. Now, why that dispute emerges, we will see when we talk about the Somdurungchu incident. The middle sector, that is the Uttarakhand and Himachal border, is least controversial. Except there is this area called Barahoti Plains. It is basically a low-level mountain pass. Okay. So the only dispute is how the LAC passes through the Barahoti Plains. What is the alignment? But apart from this minor area, middle sector is mostly settled. Maps have been exchanged, and both sides agree that this is the alignment. In the western sector, the Chinese LAC emerged from the two letters Zhao Enlai wrote to PM Nehru in 1959. After he had first mentioned such a line in 1956. Now, what were the circumstances in which these two letters were written? We will soon see them. Zhao said the LAC consisted of the so-called McMahon line in the east and the line up to which each side exercises actual control in the west. In the west means in the Aksai Chin area. In his book Choices Inside the Making of India's Foreign Policy, Shiv Shankar Menon explains that the LAC was described means in these letters only in general terms and not to the scale on the map. It means that they could still push their claim line for many miles on the ground. What it means, that you have written a letter in which we have broadly on a map, you have drawn a line, you have dotted a line, but when you start drawing the line on the ground, you can push it. There are many ways you can connect lines. Say for example, I say, look, this is the LAC. Okay, I say this is the LAC line. This is your side, this is China, and I say this is India. But in a mountainous area, it can be linked in this way also. It can be linked in this way also. Now, this much is a significant amount of territory, right? So a dotted line doesn't, do the job well. Okay, it doesn't tell you the exact alignment on the ground. Aksai Chin, it's an Uyghur phrase. This is just a trivia, not exactly relevant, that it means desert of the white rocks. Okay. Now we all know what is happening in Xinjiang province, what is happening to the Uyghurs. So I just happened to notice it, so I mentioned it, what Aksai Chin means. Okay. So here you can see all the major problematic areas that are, creating problems at this point. Here we have Depsang Plains. A major conflict is going on. Galwan Valley, where the unfortunate martyrdom of soldiers occurred. Pangong So, okay. Petrol Point. Here in this area, you have, they have not mentioned it. In this area, you have Gogra and Hot Springs, okay. And here Demchok, this area is also currently disputed. There are some other features. You must have recently read in newspapers that Pakistan has held elections in POK and they are planning to incorporate Gilgit-Baltistan as a provisional province of their country. So what happened at the time of independence? Gilgit was given on lease to East India Company, and currently it is in the occupation of Pakistanis. This another area. We are simply noticing few important features. Karakoram Pass. Okay, this links the POK with the Xinjiang region. Siachen Glacier. This whole region is Siachen Glacier. This whole region is Siachen Glacier. Though the conflict about the Siachen Glacier has its own interesting history, but right now it is outside the scope of this lecture. Okay, this Saksagam Valley was ceded by Pakistan to China in 1963. Under what circumstances, we are soon going to see. Okay. Now on this map, this is in the NCERT. I want you to notice this Kunlun Shan Mount, Kunlun Shan. Okay, this is the Pamir Knot. You must have heard about it. Pamir Knot, it is from this point different mountain chains, mountain ranges, emerge and move in different directions. So you have this Himalayan range, you have Hindu Kush, you have Kunlun mountains. Though here they have shown Kunlun mountains at slightly northward. It should be exactly like this. Right, very, very close to the borders of our country. What we see, the borders that we see on the map, it should be like this. This is a more accurate representation. See, it goes right through here. Okay, and this is the Karakoram. Now, why we are focusing on Karakoram and Kunlun mountains? See here, the origin of the boundary dispute. What it says that even at its most extensive during the Qing dynasty, that ruled from 1614 to 1911. In 1911, there was this, revolution in China. China was proclaimed a republic, and the monarchy was ended. Though the republic was short-lived, because in 1947, very soon in 1940s, it became the communist country. But in 1911, it became a republic, and monarchy was ended. So even at its most extensive during the Qing dynasty, the Chinese maps never claimed authority south of the Kunlun mountains, this mountain range. They never claimed authority to the south of it, in this area basically, right? They said, okay, our authority is only in this area. But now to the west of Karakoram Pass, I want you to again see where Karakoram Pass is, okay? This area. To the west means in this area, this region. This is the Karakoram Pass, and to the west of it means here, and to the east of it would mean in this area. To the west of Karakoram Pass, on the British abatement from the 1890s, Chinese began asserting authority in right up to the Mushtaq and Arghil ranges. This is the line conceded by Pakistan in 1963 CE. Now you would think, why British would encourage Chinese to, stake claim on this area? The answer is the Great Game. In world history as well as in India's modern history, you must have heard this term. Basically, the British were worried about the security of their Indian empire, as the Russian empire was expanding through Central Asia. So they wanted a series of buffer states between the Russian empire and British Indian empire, starting from Iran, Afghanistan, China and Tibet on this side. But there is this this area in the north of the Kashmir. So they thought, okay, how do we create a buffer here? So they actively encouraged Chinese to stake claim in these areas, so that their territory would extend, and it will also become a buffer between Russia and Indian empire in this area. So they started encouraging them to claim territory south of the Kunlun mountains, and they indeed claimed this area, and that area was ceded by Pakistan in 1963. Okay. because they wanted to have a friendly, the reason was very simple, geopolitical. They wanted to have a friendly relationship with China to counter India, something we see till today. So, to the west of Karakoram Pass, on the British abatement from the 1890s on account of the Great Game, China became, you must have read about the few Afghan wars, okay, the Chinese expeditions to Tibet, etc. All these were part of the Great Game. Their purpose was to create a series of buffer states that were preferably under the control of British. So China began asserting authority south of the Kunlun mountains right up to the Mushtaq and Argil ranges. This Argil pass is visible in atlas. So if you have typical school atlas, you can see Argil pass in it. This is the line considered by Pakistan in 1963. We are talking about the area west of Karakoram Pass, which would have fallen into POK. Okay. To the east of Karakoram Pass, Chinese began asserting their claim only after, not until, only after the construction of Aksai Chin Road after they had annexed Tibet in 1849. What it says, that in this area to the west of Karakoram Pass, they asserted authority because British wanted them to be a buffer between Russian Empire and Indian Empire. So British encouraged them and they moved in, and that area was ceded by Pakistan in 63 because they wanted to have a friendly relationship with China. But to the east of Karakoram Pass, they had never asserted authority. Okay, they only started doing so when they annexed Tibet, and to better control Tibet, they started building a road from Xinjiang province, means this region, to this region. What they did, they wanted to build a, we will see that road. Okay, here we can see clearly. This area is Xinjiang province and this area is Tibet. So they wanted to build a road through this from Yarkand, a very important city in Xinjiang province, to Lhasa. Okay. So then they said, since they wanted to control Tibet, they needed Aksai Chin territory. They built a road through it, and only after that they started asserting their authority on Aksai Chin. Before that, they never did. To the west of Karakoram Pass, the Hunza Principality, which was incorporated into modern states, and to the east of Karakoram Pass, the Kashmir state. Hunza Principality and Kashmir state had well documented administrative jurisdiction. Regardless of the Indian claim, there was no Chinese influence on the area until 1950s, when they began building the road from Yarkand to Lhasa. Okay. So what we saw, we have seen this area. We have covered. We have covered the area to the west of Karakoram Pass and to the east of Karakoram Pass. Now this area, though Pakistan strictly speaking, right now it is not our headache, because this area would have fallen into POK anyway. Our headache is this area, the Aksai Chin. We say that area was ceded by Pakistan, that's enough. But here you never had any authority, you never claimed anything until you built the road. But what about this area? Okay, Aksai Chin we understood. The west of Karakoram we understood. What about this area? Here we see the Ladakh-Tibet boundary had been well established since 1842. How, we will see. The 1842 treaty between the Sikh Empire and the Qing dynasty set the Ladakh-Tibet boundary. Sikh Empire of Ranjit Singh, if you remember, he had conquered Jammu Kashmir as well, and his generals had attacked Ladakh also, and then they had a treaty with Tibet to demarcate the boundary. Where was the boundary? From Lanakla Pass in the north at the head of Changchenmo and Niangsu in Pengongso area to Demchok in the south. After them, when the Sikh Empire was replaced by British Empire, and if you recall, they sold the valley, to the Dogra rulers of Jammu. They sold the Kashmir Valley and Ladakh area to Dogra rulers. So even they exercised jurisdiction over much of the boundary. Let's see where this is. It says from Lanakla here. This area is Changchenmo. In your atlas, you will see names like Lingzi Tang, Changchenbo, Soda Plains, Aksai Chin. Okay, Soda Plains is here. Lingzi Tang area is here. It says from Lanakla via Pangongso. In Pangongso, they say that in Pangongso, Niangsu area. Now see, currently LAC is very far here. If you remember, we had disputes between finger 4 and finger 8 area in Pangongso. Here we have those fingers. But the treaty, the 1842 treaty between the Sikh state and the Tibet mentioned LAC was here. Up to, from this point right up to here, Demchok. So this was the boundary, meaning the boundary between southern Ladakh and Tibet. This area is Xinjiang, remember, this part is Xinjiang. Here we are talking about boundary with Tibet. They said this was the boundary from Lanakla till Demchok, the boundary that we see on our atlas today. To the south of Demchok is this area Chumar. Demchok is not visible on our atlas mostly, but Chumar is visible. It is just north of Demchok. Sorry, Chumar is just south of Demchok. Okay. So this was the basis of boundary between Ladakh and Tibet. But the Survey of India maps from British era showed much of this boundary as undefined in the western section. Why? Because British had their own thinking. They were playing great games. Every now and then a foreign ministry official will randomly draw another line because of local compulsions and their geopolitical compulsions. If you remember, recently we had violence on Assam-Mizoram border. There also we saw that first they drew a line in 1873 under Eastern Bengal Frontier Regulation. Then randomly, whimsically, because they had to serve their commercial interests, they redrew the line. And they first time they consulted local chiefs, second time they didn't, and that is causing dispute now. So this was their behavior, right? That they will randomly, according to the interests of their own empire, according to their colonial interests, they will redraw things. But India says that all the boundaries to the west of Karakoram Pass, the area to the west of Karakoram Pass, Chinese never had any authority, but the Kashmir state had, and the boundary between Ladakh and Tibet. That on that area we had well established treaties between the Sikh state and the Sikh state of Ranjit Singh and Tibetan rulers. Only in 1954 a decision was taken to publish new maps with fixed alignments showing Aksai Chin in the Indian territory. Because Government of India realized, look, we have historical basis, we have treaties, we have old maps to show that Aksai Chin was part of the Kashmir state and the boundary between Ladakh and Tibet was also clear. So why we leave it undefined? Let's draw the line properly. Okay. The LAC in the present LAC in the area is the result of additional territory occupied by Chinese forces in 1962 war. What we saw here. But look, this is supposed to be the boundary. This is supposed to be the, okay, let me push everything. This is the international boundary. Okay. Here we are saying that the boundary was settled on the basis of customs, usage and old treaties. But right now this is the LAC, and even on LAC there are many areas which are disputed. Now why they are disputed? That is, there are reasons for also that why even they are already much inside. Now we have LAC which is much inside, and there also we have disputes in areas like Galwan Valley, Galwan River Valley, the Trig Heights, this area in the Depsang Plains. Look, this is Daulat Beg Oldi. This is the northernmost airfield, and it is well developed airfield. Okay. One of the reasons why they are pushing us at the Depsang Plain is because they want to make Daulat Beg Oldi indefensible. Because if they come further inside, you will see it will become very difficult to defend Daulat Beg Oldi. We have problems at Pangongso, Chushul sector. We keep hearing problems here. In Demchok we have problem. In 2013 in Chumar area they had come in. In Rizangla here also we have some issues. So forget the international boundary. Right now dispute is much inside the boundary. Now we saw that in eastern sector McMahon line is the boundary. Okay, so we'll see that British had drawn it to protect the prosperous tea estates of Assam from raids across Himalayas. They compelled the Tibetans to cede Tawang. So Tawang was, spiritually under the control of the ruler of Tibet called Dalai Lama. Okay, Dalai Lama is both spiritual as well as temporal head of Tibet, and Tawang was under the spiritual control of, under the ecclesiastical rulership of Tibet. But it was ceded in this treaty. Otherwise, it would have been difficult to defend Assam if Tibet again comes under the Chinese control. If Tibet again comes under the Chinese control, what had happened that in 1911, when there was a revolution in China and it became republic, so Tibet overthrew the suzerainty of the rulers. Earlier, it was under the nominal overlordship of, rulers from Beijing. They will pay tributes, they will, pay obedience, but they were not part of it. They were, a kind of feudatory. But when China became republic, they overthrew that relationship and they declared their independence. So it says ki if China again asserts its control, which it did in 1949, they realized that it will be difficult to defend Assam. Therefore, they took Tawang. So this was a pure geopolitical move. Then there was an inner line at the foot of Arunachal Hills, separating hills from the plains of Brahmaputra Valley. Here, this will be broadly, we can say, this will be inner line. Okay, so this is McMahon line and this is inner line. Inner line was drawn not only between Arunachal and Assam, but later, in Eastern Frontier Regulation, Bengal Eastern Frontier Regulation, it was already with many areas. Basically, this inner line separated the Brahmaputra Valley, the plains of Brahmaputra Valley and the hills. Not only hills, but across northeast. They used this yardstick to separate tribal areas of hill people, the hill people and plain people. They wanted to keep them separate. They had their own anthropological and sociological thinking, which has now been rejected entirely. Between the inner line and the McMahon line, there were numerous smaller self-administered tribes. These people became Indian citizens on 15th August 1947. Obviously, when India became independent, slowly the Indian government moved in to fill the administrative vacuum left behind by the British, because they were not administering the area between inner line and the McMahon line. They mostly left people to their own devices. They left them poor. They did not care much for their education. They did not care much for the law and order and governance. But they had a very security centric mindset that we want to control this area from a security perspective, not from governance and development perspective. It is only after independence that Government of India extended the administration into Arunachal. Officers began to fan out into entire NEFA. Arunachal was earlier called NEFA, Northeast Frontier Agency. And we have this in Pakistan right now. You have Northwest Frontier Agency, which is now called Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So these were, typical administrative behaviors of British to give this, very, even the name gives you a very, the undertone of the name itself is very security centric. That tells you they look everything from the perspective of security, from colonization, colonial interest. In 1951, a small force with a political officer went to Tamang and instructed the lamas that they need no longer pay tribute to Lhasa. So they were still paying some nominal tribute because they thought that we are still under the ecclesiastical or religious authority of Lhasa, so we have, some duty. But then Government of India forces told them that this is no longer needed. And anyway, in 49, the Tibet had been annexed by China. So that reality had already been extinguished. Actually, another service, right now we have All India Services, IS, IPS, IFS. Another service was created, Indian Frontier Administrative Service. And the members of this service were taught by a sociologist, Verrier Elwin. This person has made an immense contribution to this country. He was a British, he was a sociologist, a friend of Prime Minister Nehru, and he would specifically teach the members of this service how to deal with the frontier tribes, so that they have to respect their customs, they have to respect their manners, yet assert the authority of Government of India, yet bring development and governance to these areas. So these nuances were taught by a sociologist. And this tells you the close linkages between academia and administration. Later, this service was merged with the Agmut cadre of IAS. On the other hand, China was secretly working on the highway through Aksai Chin and pushing the LAC westward with the help of its own forward policy. So our forward policy infamous, but right now they are pursuing their own forward policy. China had conquered Tibet in 49. The road linking Yarkand to Lhasa was essential to keep its hold on Tibet. What we saw here, right? So basically in Arunachal, there was no authority, no administrative control. India was gradually establishing it, and in Aksai Chin, China was playing its own game. So see, they are already pushing LAC, and this is the Aksai Chin road that is connecting Tibet with Xinjiang province. Now China has bullet. See, try to understand one thing. Tibet is a plateau. To access it from mainland China is a bit difficult. Now they have bullet trains up to Lhasa, and they are building bullet trains up to the India border and Nepal border. Earlier it was a bit difficult, though to access India-China border from Tibet, from Chinese side is easy compared to the Indian side. But still, Tibet is a high mountain, is a plateau. So in 40s, 50s, it was still challenging. Now they have bullet trains. Earlier they had to depend on this road via Xinjiang, okay, to control this Tibet region. We have seen here. Remember this place Somdurung Chu. Okay, here you have Tawang. On atlas you can see Tawang, and this area Somdurung Chu. India maintains that there is a customary boundary between Ladakh and Tibet. We saw 1842 agreement, and even in the case of Himachal, the boundaries on the Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand borders. Actually, the local principalities and the Tibetan government, they had earlier understandings based on customs and usage. So even there a traditional border has existed between the local states, which in 1954 Nehru visited China, and in 56 Zhou Enlai visited India along with Dalai Lama and Panchen Lama. Though Dalai Lama and Panchen Lama were invited in this case because they were celebrating a major event in Buddhism. I think it pertained to the birth anniversary of Buddha, and there was this major event in India. So the spiritual head of Tibetans was also invited. You can, though Panchen Lama, you can consider him as second in command to Dalai Lama. On both the occasions, Nehru raised the matter of Chinese activity on Indian side of the boundary and the incorrect Chinese maps. So here Prime Minister Zhou Enlai played a great trick. He said, look, these are old maps. Old Kuomintang means KMT maps. If you recall, the Chinese Civil War was fought between the Communist Party of China and KMT. In 1911, Sun Yat-sen proclaimed China a republic. He was the founder of KMT. After him, Chiang Kai-shek came up, and Chiang Kai-shek and Mao had this massive civil war in which eventually Mao won. So he said, look, these are old KMT maps. We don't trust them, and we are looking into the issue. In 54, a Panchsheel agreement was signed, which mentioned the passes through which trade between India and the Tibet region of China will be conducted. So India thought, look, since China has accepted that these passes through which trade will be conducted, that means they are giving sanctity to the boundary indirectly. But later Chinese said, no, it didn't mean that these are border passes. We simply said the trade will be conducted through these passes, but we never said these will be border passes. So there again another trick. This survey of India maps, we have seen this already, that it was mentioning, it kept most of the area as undefined. Government of India said why it is left undefined, why they have brushed it with watercolor. We have old customs, we have old usage, we have old geographical features to to clarify that where our boundaries are. So we would not leave it undefined because Chinese are being slightly iffy. So let's define the boundary. In 57, Indian patrols discovered the existence of this road, and that was a big shock. They realized, oh my God, they are building a road so much inside our territory. Indian patrols just happened to discover that there is this already a well-constructed road through which mechanized vehicles can also pass through. In 58, an official magazine, the China Pictorial, published a map showing large parts of Nepha, meaning Arunachal, and Ladakh as Chinese territory. So this started a diplomatic communication between the two countries, which kept increasing in seriousness, tension, and the rank of correspondence. What it means that initially, consular, what happens that whenever a diplomatic incident happens, you summon the consular, someone from local consulate. Okay, someone from Chinese consulate will be summoned. You will hand over a note of protest. You will have some discussion, and the matter will be closed. But if the matter is more serious, communication comes back from the other side. Next time you will talk with ambassador. Next time you will talk to the defense minister. Next time you will talk with prime minister himself. So gradually communication, the level of communication, between the level of officers or the politicians between which the communication was taking place, that kept increasing, because the nature of dispute was becoming clear, and it was being realized that the nature of the dispute is far more deeper. By the end of 1958, both prime ministers were writing to each other. So what starts at the consulate level, gradually the level of communication kept going up, and right up to the levels of prime ministers. The letters between Nehru and Zhao Enlai remain a key source for understanding the border dispute. I would like to mention this small thing, that in some sources the Zhao is written as Chou, at CHOU. Okay. Until 58, when India formally conveyed that the entire Aksai Chin belonged to her and the Chinese road through it was a violation of her sovereignty, until that point, the McMahon line in the eastern sector wasn't formally disputed by the Chinese. They would say, look, this, what earlier they would say? They would say, yes, the McMahon line exists. Yes, it was drawn by a colonial power, by imperialists, and we being communist, you being socialist, we should not accept it. But I do know that peace between both the countries is far more important. Earlier we saw that in 54 Nehruji went to China, in 56 Zhao Enlai came. So there they used to say, look, we should not allow a wedge driven by the colonial power to separate us, to create tension between us. The peace between both the countries is more important than some territory. So he said, we will see, we will sort it out. I don't mind this thing. I don't like the line, but that's okay. We will live with it. We will accept it as a boundary. But for the first time in 58, they said, no, we are not going to accept it, and this area is also disputed. Chinese had no historical claim on the territory south of Kunlun Mountains, and neither she had disputed the McMahon line from 14 to 47. And now they are saying that entire boundary in the Kunlun Aksai Chin area, Ladakh Tibet boundary, as well as Arunachal boundary, everything is disputed, and we have to negotiate everything afresh. In 59, Zhao Enlai first made it clear in writing. He said the China disputed McMahon line in the eastern sector and the Kunlun boundary, Kunlun-Shan boundary in the western sector, and wanted to negotiate entire India-China boundary. He described the McMahon line as an illegal vestige of colonialism, but China had accepted this line as a boundary with Burma. They would not mention it as a McMahon line, but they accepted the alignment of McMahon line in agreement with Burma. So Nehruji naturally thought that you are accepting it, you are saying that we are fine with it when it comes to Burma, but with me you are saying no, I am not fine with it, I dispute it, I want to renegotiate it. Basically it was a tactic by Zhao Enlai. He knew that his claims in Aksai Chin are weak, but because of that road they need it, so they thought that if I raise dispute on McMahon line, we would be able to arrive at some sort of bargain where I will say I am letting you keep Arunachal, please let me keep Aksai Chin. But this was so oblique, the reference was so oblique, the reference was so indirect that perhaps this, this nuance was missed. Therefore, Zhao Enlai was saying that no sir, there is a dispute. Nehruji was saying there is no dispute because you never had any claim south of Kunlun Shan, you never disputed McMahon line before. Zhao Enlai says no, everything is disputed. Now before we proceed further, let's see some points. Okay, The first is the Johnson Line of 1865, basis of our maps. Johnson Line, who was Johnson? Obviously a colonial official. He kept the entire area south of Kunlun Shan Mountains. Here, if you can see, Kunlun Range. He kept the entire area south of Kunlun Shan Mountain, that is entire Aksai Chin, as part of India. This is one. This thing. This border, this is the Johnson Line is the basis of our claim. Again, the grid game starts and the random drawing and redrawing of maps begin. Foreign Office Line of 1873, this one. Now you will say, what is the logic? Colonialism, grid game, their whims and fancies of British officials. This is the second one, okay? Though this merges with the green line after this point. Third, McCartney-MacDonald Line of 1899, informally accepted by the Chinese till 1959. The green one, this is the third. Even though it gives some area in Aksai Chin to the China, still a very large portion is given to India also. What had happened that in 1899, the British representatives in Xinjiang and the Chinese representatives met, they exchanged maps, but they never signed anything formally, and both sides, informally agreed that this should be the boundary. So till 1959, they did not object to it. They said, fine, this green line is the boundary. Okay. Sikyang Tibet Road, this one. This is the fourth. The road going from, it goes further to Xinjiang and here to Lhasa. Points to which Indian patrols had been going up to 1958. These are the points. This area, Lanakla, Haji Langar, Karatag Pass. So Indian patrols used to go that far. And here they might have discovered that there is this road exists. Okay. When they were going that far, they realized that, oh, we have a road here. Lines connecting the points, line connecting the post established by Chinese in 59. This line, this is that, they had ingressed much further inside. Sorry, not 5, 6. Okay. So this is the line that they had pushed in. Line separating the Indian side and Chinese forces on 7th December 1962. This blue line, 7th. And India says that this line should be the LAC, because this is where we actually were. Look, understand the difference. India claims entire Aksai Chin as part of India. Okay. India says that should be the international boundary. But in order to keep peace, we have to demarcate LAC also, line of actual control, that how far my control exists on the ground and how far you control. India says it should be what was immediately before the war of 62. Chinese claim line of 1959, which it reached in 62, this one, this red one, the farthest, okay, this is the farthest. China, this is in that letter that Zhou Enlai wrote to Prime Minister Nehru back. He said, look, this is the line. They came this far in the war, but then withdrew 20 kilometers. Okay. And now they are using this called salami slicing or salami tactic. See what happened in many places, they went 20 kilometers back from their own perception of LAC. Okay, that is not the LAC. We are saying LAC should be this blue line where we were immediately before the war. You started the war, you came as far as you thought the LAC was, and then they unilaterally withdrew 20 kilometers. Now in many areas, since they had withdrawn, in many areas in the decades after 62 war, India started patrolling. Okay. And in many areas, India went farther than their perception of LAC. For example, currently the area, this point, here you have, in this part you have Gogra and Hot Spring area. So here Indian patrol regularly go to the point, regularly go to the Hot Spring area, to the Gogra area. Now Chinese say, ki look, you are coming this far and this area is on our side of LAC. You are able to come this far only because we withdrew 20 kilometers from that LAC. And we don't want to do that anymore. We want to, claim the entire LAC that our Prime Minister mentioned to your Prime Minister in 59. And therefore, whenever the issue escalates, you hear Chinese Foreign Ministry and Chinese media saying that India should adhere to the 1959 claim line. But India says कि that is your दादागिरी, उसका कोई basis नहीं है. You just started a war and pushed further inside and then you withdrew, not my problem. Now since you have withdrawn and I think that area is mine, I am patrolling that area. So this is the current level of dispute is here. Currently we are disputing this point that India started patrolling areas. Some of the areas were to the north of, to the east of the 50 in Depsang Plains, in this area, Gogra Hot Spring area, in Galwan Valley, in Pangong So, in Chumar, Demchok, everywhere. This is the issue that China says ki you are coming on our side of the 1959 LAC. India says ki we do not accept the 1959 LAC. Okay, therefore, we are not crossing into your side. We are just asserting our patrol. And then China's Tibet-Xinjiang boundary. So it is not so important. Basically, whenever we think about Ladakh, we only think Tibet. We also have to think about Xinjiang. According to them, this is the boundary. Okay, you can see they say कि south of it is Ladakh, north of it is Xinjiang province. Nehruji replied in 59 that there might be a few gaps here and there, but for much of our boundary with China, there is sufficient authority based on geographical features like watersheds, mountain tops, tradition as well as treaties. But before Zhao Enlai could respond, the Tibetan Khampa revolt broke out in 1959. Because what was happening that since China had annexed Tibet in 49, they were suppressing their religious freedoms, their freedom of movement. They were oppressing their communism on, they are imposing their communism on their on Tibetan religion. Earlier, the Chinese Communist Party was very anti-religion. So their entire way of life was getting threatened. Even in 56, when Dalai Lama and Panchen Lama accompanied Zhao Enlai to India, they met secretly with Prime Minister Nehru and said, "Look, I want asylum. They are oppressing me. They could assassinate me anytime. They are, oppressing our people. I want asylum." But Nehruji said, "Look, how can I give you asylum? That will escalate the problem between both the countries. Okay. And now, if you go to any other Western country, Cold War is going on, and they will simply use you as a pawn. Nobody is interested in your cause. So go back and try to settle issues, between the two sides. Ask for autonomy. Do not ask for independence." He went back, but things escalated, and in 59, the Tibetans broke out into full-fledged revolt. And Dalai Lama came to India after that, via Arunachal. That is already well documented. When he rode back, that means after, revolt had started, Zhao Enlai rode back. Obviously, they would be angry. They would think that, India and CIA are helping the Tibetan revolt, rebellion, and Dalai Lama had crossed into India. So he thought they had very strong suspicion that India was supporting them. He rode back and he accused India of shielding and aiding the Tibetan rebels. And this is a very important point to understand. In India-China issue, Tibet is a pivot. The Tibetan question and the Chinese insecurities about Tibet, which persist till date, they are very important. Nehru rejected this accusation and argued that no Chinese government had objected to McMahon Line from 14 to 47. In September 1959, government released a white paper containing 5 years of correspondence with China. Because up to this point, a lot of information had come out in media. People were realizing that the India-China border is hot. It is not peaceful as thought so. Okay, Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai is not working. We had occasional border clashes also. That China pictorial issue from 58 was going on. So opposition, media, civil society was building pressure on government to release all the communication that they had with China, especially with respect to border, which they did in 59, and all hell broke loose. People realized the gravity of the problem, the nationalism and the pride was hurt, and after that it became very difficult to convince people. When the pride takes over, practicality goes out through the back door. And simultaneously we had this controversy between Army General Thimayya and Defense Minister Menon. Though they had some differences in their personality, they also had some differences in their approach. Menon did not think that the China issue was so significant. Thimayya thought, no, it is. He asked for modernization. He wanted to, for example, he wanted new guns. Okay, and he suggested that this certain NATO gun from Belgium should be manufactured in India. Now defense minister said, no, I would not allow a NATO gun inside India. That is like, joining capitalist bloc. So there was this controversy. General Thimayya said, ki, fine, I am going to resign. And all this was blowing out of proportion. This also added fuel to the fire. By this time, letters and bullets both were being exchanged. Clashes at Longju in August 59 and Konka Pass, areas of Ladakh, prompted New Delhi to review frontier policy. 4th Division was pulled out of Punjab and sent to Nefa, and through this a new forward policy was started. A division in army, you have first command. Now the command divides. If you are reading newspapers these days, you will realize India has 7 army commands. Within commands you have corps. We have 13 army corps, and within corps you have divisions. These are very large fighting formations. Okay, so an entire fighting formation column was shifted from Pakistan border to Tibet, theater. Sorry, not Tibet, Nefa. And a new forward policy was started. What it means that India also started pushing forward in the contested border areas. India said, keep patrol as far as possible, establish permanent posts, and if you see some small Chinese detachments, push them away, because they are on our territory and not vice versa. After border clashes, Jhao Enlai suggested that both sides should withdraw 20 km from LAC and McMahon line. Which LAC? Which he had mentioned in his 1959 letter. Okay. Nehru replied that this only legitimizes the Chinese ingress in the western sector. He said कि आप जो LAC बता रहे हैं, the LAC you are saying in your letter, now that exists only because you have come so far inside in Aksai Chin. The entire Aksai Chin belongs to me, to my country. You are inside. Now you are saying, look, I have come this far. Now please accept this as LAC. You go 20 kilometers back, I will go 20 kilometers back. He said, look, this is first you come to my area. Okay, so that legitimizes your transgressions. Jhao argued that if we are not crossing the illegal McMahon line, then why you can't withdraw from LAC? He was speaking in diplomatic code. Basically, he meant you keep your territory in the east, we will keep our territory in the west. Okay, he accepted that yes, we don't accept McMahon line, but we know you are in firm control of the area south of McMahon line. You have between inner line and between McMahon line, you have established your administration, you have established control, but in Aksai Chin, we control area. So why not you keep that part, I keep this part. But they spoke in so much diplomatic code, so indirectly, in such an oblique manner that the message was missed. On the Indian side, we took them at face value. They said we both are disputed, so we thought they are being unnecessarily unreasonable. Perhaps India could have accepted this proposition, given that it was all doing of the colonial British. After all, they had drawn a McMahon line arbitrarily. They had taken Tawang from Tibet. So India might have accepted, but the unilateral actions of the Chinese in the western sector made it a matter of pride. Means it's just like, you ask politely, then we might think about it, right? We might consider that yes, the boundary that we are clear, that the Johnson line is, it is also a colonial construct. The McMahon line is also a colonial construct. We both are hardcore anti-colonialists. So why not sit down and come up with something else? But what they did, they tried to change the status quo unilaterally. The Dadagiri basically. So India said no, now it's a matter of pride. With positions hardening, Nehruji invited Jhao for a summit meeting, but the pitch was already cleared. We saw after white paper was published in parliament, issue caught fire. We had this general defense minister controversy. We had bullets being exchanged on the border. Soldiers are dying. If you recall, when soldiers died in Galwan Valley, country was so angry. So in Delhi, he met a broad section of Indian political opinion and spent hours with PM. Now Ramchandra Guha says that this actually backfired. Meeting a broad section of political opinion, meeting members of the Council of Ministers, meeting, journalists, meeting opposition members. What happened is that Nehruji was trying to show Jhao like that, look, we are a democratic country and I cannot just unilaterally decide anything. I have to consult so many people. There are constraints on my power. And Jhao on the other side thought he is just parading me in front of so many people. They are coming me and lecturing me and, I am being insulted. So this is, here the difference in civilization, difference in perception matters. That this issue backfired in a way. Jhao suggested to PM Nehru that he might accept the McMahon Line in the east if India acquiesced to the status quo created in the west by China. But India said, no, how can I accept status quo in Aksai Chin? Because that status quo is created by your dadagiri. You're cheating. You tell me in 54 and 56 that whatever issue we have, we will solve amicably. We are Hindi Chini bhai bhai. Forget about it. And now you are saying everything is disputed. You come so much inside in a territory that you never claimed before. And now you need a road to control Tibet. So you are asking for whole territory. You never claimed McMahon Line was illegal. Now you are saying it's illegal. So how can I accept your proposition? At this point, the positions were irreconcilable, right? What they wanted, Prime Minister Nehru could not give. What Prime Minister Nehru wanted, they could not give. Timing of India's rejection of this offer, soon after India had given asylum to Dalai Lama, seemed to confirm to the Chinese that India and CIA had designs on Tibet. Means they wanted to create a permanent unrest in Tibet. They want to take Tibet from us. They want to weaken us. Therefore, they decided that they will punish India and started preparing for war. The timing was the only question. And the domestic compulsions of Mao and in an international environment were also important factors. Look, whenever such monumental issues happen, they never pertain only to one angle. Yes, you have a dispute on border, but that doesn't mean you go to the war just for the sake of it. You have to consider other things also. Okay? When India revoked Article 370, they had to look into the geopolitics. They had to understand the global environment. Here what happened? China wanted to punish India, but timing was important because you have to ensure that Russia and USA are busy in their own stuff. They should not be available to intervene immediately. Also, it should be such that you catch India unprepared. Domestic compulsions of Mao. Basically, at this point, due to the Great Leap Forward, which was disastrous for China, millions of people died because of hunger. The position of Mao was very weak. He was getting isolated. His opponents in the party were baying for his blood. So he wanted something to, demobilize people, to, galvanize them around his leadership, to fire their imagination. And the international environment was also problematic because at this point, China was very isolated. Very isolated. Their relationship with USSR was collapsing. With America, they had no diplomatic relationship. India, being a leader of non-alignment movement, was gaining a lot of international recognition. Her role in Vietnam, her role in Korea, her proactive stance against, not against, for decolonization. Those things were getting India friends, whereas China was getting more and more isolated. So they thought, okay, let's, defeat this guy. Let's humiliate him. So once this Prime Minister Nehru is humiliated, he will start losing friends and my stature would go up internationally. So these were some of the factors. Then India had its own forward policy. Basically, Burton Lintner says that there was this cabinet meeting in 61 where it was decided that Indian troops will start moving forward. They will patrol more aggressively They will start creating permanent structures both on eastern and western front, and if they come across some Chinese detachments, then they will push them away. Now the criticism is that you are adopting an aggressive stance, but do you have a backup? Do you have a plan for a situation, for a scenario where the conflict escalates? So the criticism is this, that India did not plan for escalation. They were simply thinking that there would be no war. Let's just push them away. It's just like okay, this person has parked car in my place, so let's compel him to take away his car. But what if he comes back with a mood to fight? Then have you prepared for the fight? China-India war in October-November 1962 happens. See, China was already preparing. And there is this book, The Himalayan Blunder, The Angry Truth about India's most crushing military disaster. In this, an army officer who has written the book, he was captured as a POW, prisoner of war. And what he saw in the POW camps, he realized that China was preparing for it. They had translators who could speak different languages of India so that the Chinese soldiers could talk to the Indian POWs. They had shelters, they had all logistical arrangements, everything. And he gives many other examples to prove that China was preparing for the war. It was not some haphazard thing. After the war, in China, this China war happens at the same time when the Cuban Missile Crisis was going on. What is Cuban Missile Crisis? You will see in world history. And it was a very tense moment. The world was on the brink of nuclear war. USA and USSR were, engaged so much into it that they could not look at anything else. The timing was perfect. Of course, from China's perspective. On November 90, China declared a unilateral ceasefire and withdrew to 20 kilometers behind what it described an LAC of November 7, 1959. The letter Prime Minister Zhou Enlai wrote to Prime Minister Nehru. After that, Government of India commissioned two army officers, Henderson Brooks and Bhagat. They wrote a report, but it is a secret report. It is not in public domain. However, it was accessed by some journalists, including this Neville Maxwell, who wrote India's China War. And in this book, he blames India entirely. And he blames Nehruji's forward policy for provoking China. He says it was India's China War. They said, look, they provoked China, China retaliated. But then the books like Himalayan Blunder, which says that no, China were already prepared, China was already preparing for it much before the forward policy India started. They had logistics sorted out, they had soldiers mobilization sorted out, they had rations, they had munitions, prisoner of war camps, everything was prepared. So they were preparing for much longer. And the same thing is substantiated in this book, China's India War by Bertin Littner also. They said no, forward policy was not the reason. Because of the international scenario, Mao's own compulsions, and the longer irreconcilable differences between India and China, that the war happened. After the war, there was this incident in Sikkim. Basically, on the Sikkim border. Okay. At this point, Sikkim had not become India's a state. It had not joined India. So at Nathula and Chola, these incidents happened, and Indian army gave Chinese army a bloody nose. From all accounts, it is firmly established that the casualties on the Chinese side was much higher. Indians were prepared, Indians were anticipating, and they fought back valiantly, and it restored the confidence of Indian army in many ways. The last loss of life was in October 75. This place there is this place Tulungla in Arunachal, where Chinese soldiers ambushed Indian soldiers a few kilometers inside LAC. And since then, actually what had happened, that Sikkim had just joined India and China did not like it. So they wanted to, again provoke something. So this was part of that conspiracy. That was the last time Indian soldiers lost life until what happened in Galwan Valley. In both 59 and 62, India had rejected Chinese conception of LAC. Moreover, the Chinese LAC was a disconnected series of dots on a map that could be joined up in many ways. India believed that the line should be based on the actual position on September 8, 1962, meaning just before the war started. Again, India says this should be LAC, not the international boundary. Okay, understand the difference. In the eastern sector, the LAC, whether of 59 or 62, for most part coincides with high Himalayan watershed, which is the basis of McMahon line. In India's view, it is also international boundary. So this is the difference. In western sector, in Aksai Chin area, in Ladakh area, international boundaries what we see on the map, but India says no, LAC is different. LAC is what it should be, what it was just before the war. In eastern sector, India says McMahon line is LAC as well as international boundary, both. The exceptions are tactically significant in some local areas. We are talking about eastern sector. And strategically significant where at the Bhutan boundary. Okay. Now understand the difference between what is tactically significant and strategically significant. Something is tactically significant where it helps the tactics and plans at the local level. Point is, if a line, if it is drawn in a certain way, it makes that area more defensible, or vice versa. If it makes it more difficult to defend that area. So that is an issue of tactical significance. But strategically means in a larger picture. In a larger picture, it becomes significant where it joins the Bhutan boundary and near Thagla Ridge and Sumdurung. We will see what these two areas are here. It says कि it becomes strategically significant here at Bhutan boundary and here in the Sumdurungchu area. And there are some other locally significant points, but strategically here they are important because here the alignment is, important from larger picture. In the western sector, there were differences in areas such as subsector north, Depsang, Demchok, Chushul, the areas that we saw on the map, between what the Chinese claimed was the LAC, which they supposedly respect, and what India considers LAC. The India-China border was largely unpatrolled. Now we are talking about the period immediately after the war, and left to its own devices by both sides for several years after 62 conflict. Soon after the war, each side unilaterally declared that it would not attempt to alter the status quo on boundary by force, and China pledged to respect its version of LAC. Basically, they withdrew 20 km and they said, okay, this is the status quo. The LAC that we have withdrawn 20 kilometers from, that is status quo, and we will not use force to change it. Similarly, India also said, okay, we will also not use force to change the status quo. Through 60s and 70s, India began to conduct air and satellite surveys. Limited recon became possible on foot, and some military presence began to be re-established. That the LAC was left untouched for a very long period, but then gradually India started moving towards LAC, and so did the China. After 62 war, a new defense minister YB Chavan was appointed, and he did a lot for the modernization of army. So often his role gets not acknowledged, but he was very significant in the modernization of army after 62 war, the results of which were visible in 65 only. In 76, on the basis of a better border region awareness, the Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs established the China Study Group under the Foreign Secretary to recommend revised patrolling limits. That means how far Indian patrolling parties can go, rules of engagement, and the pattern of Indian presence along the China border. Using their access from the Tibetan sites, which is easier access, Chinese also greatly improved their infrastructure. From the mid-70s, PLA no longer stayed 20 kilometers behind their version of LAC everywhere. Basically, at war, the war happened and both sides withdrew, LAC was left untouched for a while, but then as both sides enhanced their capacity, both again started coming towards LAC, gradually patrolling the area, establishing their control, and eventually a point came when they started, coming into frequent contacts. Nixon's visit to China led CIA cutting off aid to Tibet rebels. By the end of 74, the last of Tibetan guerrillas had been eliminated. These factors bolstered Chinese control over Tibet. That means they could focus more on LAC because the internal problem is solved now. Throughout this period, each side slowly moved to the line, asserting presence through periodic patrols in an intricate pattern that crisscrossed the area where both states had different interpretation of where the LAC was. So they realized that, okay, we have different interpretation of LAC. So what do? We send soldiers. Soldiers will regularly patrol that area. So whosoever controls the area decides where the LAC is. LAC is simple. So the lack of agreement was replaced by presence of soldiers. That if my soldiers come to this point regularly, okay, and your soldiers are not objecting to it, it means it is on my side of LAC. That is the logic. And this is where the conflict sometimes happens, because sometimes an area is visited by soldiers of both sides. Sometimes they turn up at the same time, so they start tailing each other. Sometimes they fight with each other. Okay, you must have seen those images where soldiers are holding a very long poster where they say ki this is on our side, please go back, stuff like that. So when you try to replace a written agreement with the with the presence on the ground, then conflict on the ground is obviously possible. When Tawang and Arunachal Pradesh were added into the picture, though China was saying that, look, China was saying that I don't agree with McMahon line and that will be negotiated, but they were never very keen on it because they were just using it as a pressure tactic, that so that India will concede on Aksai Chin. But this is the short story about it. In 83, China purportedly wanted to improve relationship with the NAM. They realized that, see what had happened in 1979. 1979 was a very pivotal event in the world history. The Iranian Revolution had happened. Okay, the new Pope John Paul was making breakthroughs in the communist world. New Ronald Reagan became president of USA. Margaret Thatcher became the prime minister. So such pivotal events were happening, and China was a bit nervous, right? The Afghanistan was invaded by Soviet Russia. So because of these events, China thought that maybe we need to improve our relationship with the third world countries, with the NAM, so that we have more friends in the time of global uncertainty. So up to 83, China said ki okay, let's invite Prime Minister Indira Gandhi to visit China as the leader of NAM. But Indian diplomats said, how can she visit? We have a border dispute, we have a hot border. Unless we have a solution to the border issue, we don't think she should come. So Chinese said, okay, we have given you package proposal by Deng Xiaoping in 82. In 82, he gave an interview to a magazine called Vikrant, where he says that, look, indirectly, again, not saying directly, but indirectly suggesting, you keep Arunachal, let us keep Aksai Chin. In Aksai Chin, the area that we control. India said, but that is not acceptable because Arunachal is ours only, and you are the aggressor in Aksai Chin. So why we should accept this? That means, we already are in a disadvantageous position and we are accepting that position. So they said fine. Chinese side hinted that they may return. Again, they hinted that they may. Nothing is clearly said, only indirectly, in a very fine manner, that they may return some territory that they occupied in 62 and accept the LAC in the east. And status quo plus, that means what you have you keep, and it will give you some more territory, right? But Indira Gandhi thought, let's wait till 85 election, but we know she was assassinated in 84. After that, when both sides met, situation in the world had changed. China, the reverberations of 79 and the pivotal events had subsided. So China was a bit more confident about its prospects. China said no. they took back their package proposal and they said, for any permanent boundary settlement in the future, you must give Tawang to us, because Tawang area, in fact, entire Arunachal Pradesh is our. We don't accept McMahon line. See, understand the difference. They accept McMahon line as a LAC because LAC is temporary. But they said for any permanent solution of the boundary issue, you have to give Arunachal Pradesh entirely to us. So they went back to the behavior of 59. They said, no, this is also disputed, that is also disputed. And after this, positions became much harder now. So we realized, look, permanent कि आप भूल जाओ कि एक permanent boundary solution immediately मिलेगा. Okay, that would not happen. Let's focus on keeping peace on LAC. Let's focus on demarcating where the LAC is. We may or we may not solve the boundary question later. Then Sumdurungchu Valley incident happens in 86. What happened? That it is to the east of Tri Junction with Bhutan and close to the initial location, of initial spark, Dhola Pass. Remember, we were talking about that the McMahon line is strategically important in some areas. First area where it meets the Bhutan boundary, then Sumdurungchu area, etc. We will see here why it is important strategically in the larger picture. In May 1986, India's annual patrol of the area. First, let's see where it is. See, this is Sumdurungchu. And here you have the, we had a pass called Dhola Pass. Here we had said that it is strategically important in near the Bhutan border and Thagla Ridge and Sumdurungchu. Why, we will see here. What had happened, that there is this Thagla Ridge which is to the north of McMahon line. So India established a Dhola Pass, Dhola Post, sorry, not pass, Dhola Post, between Thagla Ridge and McMahon line. Why? As part of the forward policy. Okay, so traditionally speaking, the Dhola Post was to the north of McMahon line and south of Thagla Ridge. So what happened, that Chinese from September 1962 started sporadic attacks on the Dhola Post, and in October 1962 launched a full-scale attack. So that is why we say that it is Sumdurungchu is close to the location of initial spark of 62 war. In May 1986, Indian annual patrol of the area, which had begun in 1983. See, we had discussed before that now, since India's capacity and awareness of the border had increased, so their patrol started going more and more forward. So they had started patrolling this area in 83. Regular patrols had started in 83. But they saw that this time China has occupied the Indian patrolling party's position. And why they could do so? Here is a dispute. See, McMahon's original map showed it to the north of the line, but it was to the south of high Himalayan watershed. Now understand, McMahon line says that it is drawn along the high Himalayan watershed. Okay, but on the ground, it is actually north of the McMahon line and south of the high watershed. So Chinese say, no, see, it is north of the McMahon line, so it is on our side. But India said, no, McMahon line is based on the principle of high Himalayan watershed. So whatever is south of it belongs to us. Then the question is, why this confusion? Because this line was drawn on the map with a thick point. The kind of point, see, this is a very thick line. Now, what is the thickness of this line? On map, it is simply a line, but on the ground, that thickness covers in some places, that thickness covers as much as 5 km territory on the ground, right? So there is this confusion. On map you think, okay, I have drawn a line, but on the ground that line becomes as wide as 5 km in some places. So due to that, this confusion came up, that Somdurung-Chu was to the north of McMahon line but south of the high Himalayan watershed. So this confusion, and that is why this place is strategically important. India's asked Chinese said, look, we are just improving our border patrol just as you are coming close to the LAC, so we are. And earlier we had decided unilaterally that we will stay 20 kilometers away from LAC, but not anymore. We are going to come close to the LAC wherever we want to. So India said fine. India also started counter mobilization, and in some places posts were set up few meters away from the Chinese posts. But remarkably, no loss of life happened in this event, despite the fact that this standoff lasted for 7 years, up to 1991, when the Premier Li Peng visited India and the status quo was restored. Here I had talked about 1979. Actually, during this period, he said that this was a period of global uncertainty. In 79, at that time, Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji was foreign minister. Not foreign, sorry, this will be finance minister. He was external affairs minister. Vajpayee ji was external affairs minister. He visited China in 79. Chinese told them, look, we will stop giving support to the insurgents. We will not support insurgency in Northeast anymore. Why? Because they wanted new friends. In 79, international situation was in great flux. I'll request you to read up on this issue. So they said, look, we will not support insurgency. So it was, in a way to bring some warmth in the relationship, because after war the diplomatic relationship between both the countries had collapsed. So they said, they made this promise and they adhered to it. After Somdurung-Chu happened, Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi went to Beijing, because it was a massive issue. Both the countries, armies of both the countries are standing eyeball to eyeball, so close to each other. Someone might get angry, someone might misbehave, and violence may happen, and who knows, that might get escalated. In that visit, and this is a very important visit, because in this visit, two important principles that would guide Indo-China relationship up till now, from 88 up till now, those two important principles came up. Though now that those principles are gone, because after Galwan Valley, after Pangong Tso, the trust is very low, and we need new guiding principles, we need new confidence building measures, everything from the start. The first was, find a boundary settlement while preserving status quo and tranquility on the border. Remember, tranquility. You can't have peace when border is not decided. You can have tranquility, right? No violence. Status quo. You stay in the control of area that you controlled, and we control the area that we controlled. Okay? Do not disturb patrolling party of each other. Second, do not let the boundary problem preclude improving relations in other spheres and cooperating in international arena wherever possible. Meaning that yes, we have a boundary issue, but do not hold back economic cooperation. Do not hold back diplomatic cooperation in places like climate change negotiation, in places like WTO, in places like IMF, right? In places like anti-terrorism bodies. So these were the two principles, that as long as we don't have permanent boundary solution, at least keep peace on the boundary. And two, do not let the boundary issue disturb the larger bilateral relationship. And these two principles worked up until now. Also, a joint working group was set up to promote an early boundary settlement. Then Li Peng visit of 1991, which we saw was helpful in solving the Somdurung-Chu issue. And then Prime Minister Narasimha Rao paid a return visit. During this visit, this very important agreement was signed. agreement on the maintenance of peace and tranquility along the line of actual control in the India-China border areas. This is the bedrock on which the confidence building measures, the standard procedures, these things were finalized that avoided violence on LAC. Remember, the LAC is far more contested than LOC. But the level of violence on LAC was, it did not happen between 1975 to 2020. No loss of life happened on LAC, which is far more undefined. But LOC, fully defined. But see, so many, until the recent ceasefire, there have been so many instances of regular shelling, regular firing, attacking civilians, cross-border terrorism. So violence on LOC was very common. But on LAC, it did not happen because of these series of agreements. A more detailed listing, the joint working group that was set up during Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi's visit, that was asked to take up the task of clarifying the alignment of LAC. Although they took it up, but up to 2002, that whole issue collapsed. Why, we will see soon. A more detailed listing of CBMs in CBM means confidence building measures. That was signed. It was called Agreement on Confidence Building Measures in the Military Field along the LAC in India-China border. It was a direct offshoot of the 93 agreement. During Prime Minister Vajpayee's visit in 2003, two sides agreed to set up special representatives level talk to explore from the perspective of overall bilateral relationship the framework of a boundary settlement. Look, the language is so expansive, it is so verbose. It does not say they will find a solution to the boundary issue. What it says, they will find political, they will explore from the perspective of overall bilateral relationship the framework of a boundary settlement. That what will be the larger principles, what will be the framework within which boundary issue will be solved. Why? Because they accept that the larger bilateral relationship are more important. So if we cannot agree on the settlement immediately, let's decide the principles on the basis of which it will be settled. And who are the special representatives? NSA on the Indian side and the state councillor from the Chinese side. Then when Jiaobao's 2005 visit, the special representatives succeeded in drafting political parameters and guiding principles for solving the boundary question. See, you can read up on these individual agreements individually. The point here is this series of agreements kept peace at LAC from 1990s till now. The protocol on the modalities for the implementation of CBM, and then very importantly, China accepted that Sikkim was a part of India during this visit. Actually, it was finalized during the Prime Minister Vajpayee's visit in 2003. But when Prime Minister Wen Jiabao visited India, he said at that time China issued official maps that accepted that Sikkim was now part of India. In return, India once again reiterated and more firmly and unequivocally that yes, we accept Tibet is part of China. So quid pro quo. And then there was another agreement on border defense cooperation during the Prime Minister Singh's visit in 2013. Before proceeding further, I would like to say that each of these important events pertaining to the boundary issue, the series of letters that were exchanged, the China war, the agreements that were signed to keep peace on the border, they did not strictly pertain to the boundary issue. The larger geopolitical picture, the compulsions and the choices both the leaderships had to make, they were very influential. That we will see later, that what were the causes each time. Now, here we saw that now we have a series of confidence building measures and we have standard operating procedures to keep tranquility on the LAC. And that worked. The example was the Depsang incidents of May 2003. The Depsang plains right near Daulat Beg Oldi airstrip, which is the farthest, the northernmost place. was a proof that the modus operandi was working. Unlike the Somdurung-Chu incidents, India discovered the new Chinese presence on its side immediately. It moved forces and insisted that the status quo be restored before we would discuss anything further. Okay? This is not happening anymore. This we are not able to do. India is saying let's restore the status quo, and Chinese are trying, bringing every extraneous idea into the picture. They are saying no, but this is happening, that is happening, we want this, that. Here India said no, we have a series of agreements which says that status quo is paramount, keeping tranquility on the border is paramount. So let's first restore the status quo. In Depsang Plains, we have this Y junction where we have a series of patrolling points. We will discuss that when we discuss the current standoff in the next video. India said that we have been patrolling this area. Okay. Now, what normally happens in these places? China says that look, this area is on our side of LAC, the LAC of 1959. The only reason you are able to patrol that area is because we withdrew 20 kilometers and you have ingressed. India says, look, what are you talking about? That whole 1959 LAC is a fabrication. According to us, the LAC is much further to the east, immediately preceding the war. What? So India says, okay, forget these points. Where LAC, where you think LAC is, where I think LAC is. When we will finalize LAC, then we will see. But right now, the status quo is that my patrolling parties have been regularly coming to these areas. Therefore, they should be able to come to this area. We are not discussing where LAC is. That we will settle later. We have special representatives to discuss LAC, to discuss exchange maps, and we had joint working group to exchange map, to settle LAC, everything. At the level of corps commanders, at the level of local army general officers in command, they are saying my patrol parties are coming to this place. This is the status quo. If you prevent them from coming, or if you come to the place where you were not coming, that means you are altering the status quo. Here India was able to convince the Chinese within 3 weeks. And India's reason was India's improved capabilities. India immediately find out, and India could mobilize large number of soldiers immediately. And a favorable international opinion. Therefore, and it is sometimes less appreciated in this issue, that in many capitals of the world, the opinion was on India's favor that yes, China is the aggressor, China is altering the status quo. And the SOPs put in place since the 1993 agreement. The key to a successful outcome was managing public rhetoric, something that we are not able to do these days in the era of social media. Displaying strength and giving the adversary a way out. Okay. The situation on the border. In order to clarify, see, we saw that joint working group was set up to clarify LAC in 1988, and it was mandated to move faster in 1993. China had agreed to exchange maps. They did so in the case of middle sector. Successfully we exchanged maps, and since the alignment of LAC was very much similar, so there was not much issue, except that Baravati Plains, that issue still remains. But when it came to the western sector, they hesitated. They saying, look, if we exchange maps in this way, then the ground position will become ditto LOC. Sorry, ditto it will become, the status quo will turn into LAC. So they said, no, let's not exchange maps, because basically they realized that the Indian perception of LAC was very different from their perception. So the map exchanging, it can genuinely turn the status quo into LAC. So they said, no, we are not going any forward. Therefore, the process of LAC has clarification has effectively stalled since 2002. In 2003, special representatives were appointed. But what they have done, they have come up with political parameters and guiding principles to solve the boundary issue. They are also not clarifying LAC. They are talking in broad terms that what will be the parameters. India therefore does not have an agreed upon LAC with China. Therefore, to speak of a often in media they said that Chinese itna kilometer andar aa gaye, etc., etc. But if you don't have a clear LAC, then this is a exactly accurate thing. But the border was still tranquil for 3 reasons. 1. Each side had a fairly good idea of other side's patrolling patterns and the other side's perception of LAC. मतलब उनको पता था कि हम कहाँ तक जाते हैं. We knew how far we go. So they would not disturb each other. See, just because your patrolling parties go to a certain point, that doesn't mean that is the extent of LAC. That only means you are present there and you should be allowed to remain present. That is status quo. Once LAC is finalized and the area that my patrol happened to go eventually goes to your side, then we would not go. Once the LAC is finalized, then we will strictly remain behind our LAC. But until that happens, as far as we are going, we should be allowed to go. If you prevent us from going that far, that means you are trying to change the status quo. Both sides avoided provocation and implemented standard operating procedures and CBMs that were agreed during 1990s and early 2000s. Both sides had not been in contact along most of the line. Even in the areas both sides considered to be on their side of the line, where there are 16 or so contested locations where they think no, this should be on our side of LAC or vice versa. Both sides had generally refrained from establishing a permanent presence or changing the status quo. The standoff since April-May 2020 has changed all this. They are coming in close contacts, even soldiers are getting martyred, permanent structures have been built. In fact, in Pangong Tso, the finger areas in Pangong Tso, tanks and proper tanks and anti-aircraft guns, those things came very close to each other. While China improved its border infrastructure significantly in 80s and 90s, India had done more in the last 2 decades. What we have done, and these things you can quote in the if you find them relevant in your internal security questions. The first new military raising since 1970s of 2 new mountain divisions were raised. If you recall, we talked about the highest is command. Army has 7 commands. Then you have corps, we have 13 corps, and then comes the divisions. Divisions could be armored divisions, artillery, such things, infantry. And now a mountain strike corps has also been raised. Restarting advanced landing grounds like Daulat Beg Oldi, though Daulat Beg Oldi is in Ladakh area, but they have restarted some in Arunachal also. Implementing India-China study groups and general staff suggestions for roads begun in 2005, yani building new roads. Tech-int capabilities, tech-int yani technical intelligence, satellites, radar, pictures, high-resolution pictures, including the deployment of drones, introduction of Sukhoi 30 fighter aircraft and heavy lift aircraft into eastern sector. Heavy lift like Chinook heavy lift, C-130J, which is a transport aircraft and such things. C-130 landing at Daulat Beg Oldi, this is in Ladakh, and this is the northernmost airfield in India. So Daulat Beg Oldi was restarted in 2013. Imagine it had remained underutilized for so many decades. It has been restarted just now in 2013. So see, the crux is India has done more in last 2 decades than any time before. And what are the consequences of that happening? India has a survivable deterrence in many places. That means we can survive with what we have. We may not conquer or we may not vanquish the enemy, but we will survive. We can fight, hold our ground. But it is still playing catch up. China and India are now in much more frequent contact because both have come close to the LAC. Both have improved capabilities. India's patrolling is more conspicuous than in the past, and in almost all the contested areas, India's forces are more frequent visitors than the PLA. China now finds it harder to achieve their political goals, that is to convey a clear message to civilians, local civilians in Arunachal and Ladakh and military that they are bigger player, and to change or create facts on the ground with impunity. That means, now we were patrolling earlier to previous location, but now we have come forward. So therefore, this is no status quo. Changing facts on the ground as you want, but that is not possible anymore because both the armies are already very close to each other. So there is not much ground to push forward without actually fighting each other. Earlier there was this large area which was vacant, where patrolling was very limited and very infrequent. But now, since they have kept coming closer and closer, and they are right at the LAC. Okay. Now, if you want to push your patrolling limits any further, you have to stop the other side from patrolling. Okay. And that is why the conflict is happening. That they want to push further, they want to come as close to their LAC of 1959, but in many areas, India is already there. India is already patrolling regularly for few years or few decades also. So India is saying ki yes, though I don't accept your 1959 LAC, but I am here. So if you try to push me away, you are trying to change the status quo. And we have agreed that until LAC is finalized, we would not change the status quo. Chinese now find it harder to achieve. Okay. See, while the infrastructure gap is still large and perhaps even growing in some areas, the Chinese measure themselves against the situation of unchallenged domination that they had for an extended period after 1962. What it says that yes, infrastructure gap is still huge, and perhaps in some cases, in case of some weapons and technology, that might be even increasing. But earlier they were unchallenged. So they could patrol as far as they want, nobody would challenge them, they would create or change facts on the ground as they want. But now both the forces are very close, and if they want to push any further, they will have to actually replace Indian soldiers, and that they are not able to do, because even India has built enough capabilities to resist, that we already saw in this incidents. That is why China has started saying that let's freeze infrastructure build up. What it would do is that they have already built infrastructure on their side, and they're saying, okay, now we both stop, but I am still building, I still have capacity, I still have to build new roads, I still have to reinforce my forward bases. So they want to freeze that imbalance. Indian representatives have naturally resisted this and made counter proposals to limit China's assertive behavior and to clarify LAC, which the Chinese reject. This might explain the Chinese push to change the status quo in its favor before it becomes too much to handle. That means what they have started doing since May 2020 or even possibly March or April 2020, this might be a last ditch effort to change the status quo one final time, and therefore they have come on, they had come in such a large number and on so many locations that they think, okay, this might be our last chance, because the both sides are already very close to each other, patrolling same areas regularly. So if we don't do it now, India's infrastructure build up, the Daulat Beg oldie, we will see in next video where we have forward bases, especially in the Ladakh area. The new roads like DBO, the Darbuk-Shiok DBO road, and many other areas, they think that look, India has built enough capacity to permanently protect the status quo. And that means then only thing will be left to do is to clarify the LAC. That since you cannot change status quo on your, as you want to, then you have to clarify the LAC. Right now they are trying to push as far as possible, take as much area as possible, and then say, look, now where you are, where I am, let's draw LAC. But once that activity stops, then clarifying LAC is the next logical thing to do. So they are maybe trying to give one last push. All technical work on clarification of LAC has been done. Give and take is the only logical way. However, China's other interests, including its relationship with Pakistan, its suspicions about Tibet, its dependence on Indian Ocean, and the need to counter Quad, mean that it has to maintain levers in its relationship with India. That is, to cut the long story short, a boundary settlement is not a Chinese priority right now, because they think if LAC gets finalized, okay, then India has to worry less about the land issue. Okay, they would not worry much about the China. Then they will be able to divert a much larger force towards Pakistan and compel Pakistan to also commit some sort of peace. Then what will India will do? It will focus on the oceans. Right now, Indian Army and Navy are discussing whether we should have third aircraft carrier. If India's land border is settled, India might build 5. India right now has 1 or 2 nuclear submarines. Then India might have half a dozen. So they think, let's keep India engaged on the ground so that they don't focus on water. so that they don't incorporate, they don't cooperate more closely with Quad in Navy. That might be one thinking, and then the Pakistan Tibet angles are also there. Point is, it is not in their interest to clarify LAC right now. What is in their interest? Try to change status quo on the ground as much as possible. Claim as much territory as possible. How to do that? To establish permanent structures as forward as possible, to patrol as forward as possible. But here the problem is, both sides are already so close to each other, so you will have to literally push away Indian army from areas, and that is where conflict starts. Now look, behind every monumental, every milestone event, there was geopolitics. There were geopolitical factors. Okay, the border dispute did not strictly pertain to the border, and later at the end of second video, we will see that even the solution of border dispute is not at the border. What we just discussed, that right now China would not clarify LAC. They would keep pushing, they will try to push Indian army away, try to change the status quo, so that they don't want to clarify LAC right now. Once they think that they have occupied maximum area, then they might, but not right now. Why not right now? Because they think if they free India, if they give India free hand on land, India will then focus on water, and that will choke the strategic points in Indian Ocean. So they want to reduce competition with India in water. They want to keep India on the ground. So the larger geopolitics of Asia Pacific is at play here. So the solution of boundary is not only at the boundary, and every monumental event starting from the annexation of Tibet to the Galwan standoff right now has geopolitics behind it. And in our next lecture, we will look into the geopolitics of why these things happen, why these skirmishes have increased in recent decades, and the current situation. Okay, this is the end of this lecture. Thank you.